hi, viewers. Welcome to Doing Business in Bentonville. My name is Deanah Baker, and I'm thrilled to be here. I am going to be a limited series contributor to Doing Business in Bentonville, and I hope to bring topics that I've been having in my circle of friends and colleagues to you all. And I would love feedback, make sure that we're talking about the things that you find value in, and kind of further the discussion around evolving omnichannel for our mutual customers. So thanks for joining us today. I want to introduce you to a friend of mine that I've known, well, he'll date us both, I'm sure, through conversation, but Terry Trofholz. And so let me just tell you a little bit about Terry, and then I want him to fill in some gaps. But here's the cut and dry of Terry. Terry brings over 5 decades of experience in both wholesale and retail. Okay, check. Brands and private brands, both boxes, and knowledge of working with specialty stores, department stores, discounters, mass, and e-com only companies. So he has spread out and surrounded everything in retail, I do believe. Terry began his career 1973, see, I already said it, 1973 in Omaha, Nebraska. And he was an associate buyer or buyer's assistant, not quite sure, Terry, but
Gopher,
bottom up
yes.
the ladder, right? For a retailer called Richard Gordman, which you may realize more as Gordman's. I think they went on later.
That's where they're at now. Yep.
To be Gordman's. You then transitioned from retailer side of the desk to supplier side of the desk. You joined HealthTex, which is a brand I remember wearing as a kid.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
It was very popular.
Oh, yeah. They were the biggest.
They were the biggest children's wear manufacturer in the U.S. At that time. A few years later, you went on to join Levi Strauss, right, as a district sales manager.
5 years there.
Awesome. And then you ventured into private label.
Yes.
The private label business with a company called Stone Manufacturing.
Yeah. If you're a branded salesperson, then you kind of get the line that they give you, and you're just kind of told to go out and sell it. And I always wanted to have more input into what was going into the product. And I had a friend that was in the private label business, and that sounded really interesting to me. So I left.
You're like me. I like to have control of the reins. Can't help it. It's a control thing, I guess. But okay, so then you sold to Sears and Target there, right? Yep. So going into bigger mass retailers. Next, you joined Wright's Knitwear, and that's where you and I met. You were the sales exec to Walmart and Target at the time. And then lastly, Terry became an associate at Interdeco when Wright's was acquired by Interdeco in 2000. And you were there for a wonderful 25 years as EVP of Sales and Merchandising.
Yes, I was.
And you just
best thing that ever happened to me.
Fantastic. And you recently retired.
Yes, I did.
Which is awesome. So welcome to you to Doing Business in Bentonville. And we're so happy to have you.
Well, thanks very much, Deanna. I'm honored to be your first guest, and you're taking a big chance here. I mean, this is my first podcast. And really the first thing that, since I've retired, it's the first time that I set my alarm this morning.
Thank you. I appreciate being worthy.
That's right. And it's the first time I've had a chance to really kind of prepare for something, which was fun. And in preparing for this podcast, it kind of gave me a chance to really reflect on my career. And I did. My first job was in 1973, and I was 22 years old. So didn't know anything about anything. And I spent 4 years at this retailer, and then decided that it looked like everybody that was coming in to call on me was making more money, having more fun, and just enjoying life. So, and I was lucky enough that I had some really good relationships with my suppliers, and I went to work for HealthTex. And it's the first time that I'd ever moved out of Omaha, Nebraska. Or not out of Omaha, but I'd lived in Nebraska all my life. So my wife and I, we moved to Indianapolis. We didn't know a soul. And I spent time there, and then I spent time at those other jobs. And I think about that, and what's remarkable about that is that those other manufacturers, all of the clothing was made in the USA. And I can remember visiting the factories and the distribution centers And yeah, HealthTex, all made in the USA. Same thing with even Levi Strauss back then.
Wow.
And my last job before being acquired by Intradeco was at Wright's Knitwear, and we had facilities throughout Pennsylvania. We had a dye house in Allentown and a knitting house in Orwigsburg. And what kind of struck me was how all things seemed to kind of go full circle in the apparel world. I mean, trends obviously, but now by full circle, I mean, now we're looking at that the U.S. manufacturing stuck around till about the late 1990s, and then imports from China kind of started pouring in, and that had to do with World Trade Organization, the entrance by China into that, and all of a sudden they were much more competitive. So now we're in a world as of last Wednesday where we've got tariffs that are being imposed on all of the countries that are the largest exporters to the world and the largest importers for the USA in terms of apparel. And that's, with the hopes and wishes, I think that maybe some of that manufacturing can be restored in the USA. Mm-hmm. And that's a significant challenge, as everyone knows. And Walmart is certainly making strides to try to return manufacturing in all industries, I think, to the USA. Apparel is definitely challenging because just the labor differences in labor charges between the USA and China or Bangladesh or Vietnam or any of those countries is significant. Now, the administration does make a point, which I think is well taken, that it's not just the tariffs, it's the unfair trade practices as well. And, we used to look at a garment when we were getting beat, the U.S. facilities were getting beat in pricing by garments coming in from Asia. We would look at the garment, or we would look at a yarn price, and the inputs that went into that garment or that yarn price were more than what they were charging for it.
Meaning the fabric,
meaning the cotton, the price of the cotton, the fabric, any kind of labor. Yeah. So we go, what? But they can't. And what we finally figured out is that the Chinese government was subsidizing the apparel industry over there. And so obviously the U.S. makers were really put at a significant disadvantage. And that happened for a long, long time until almost all of them went out of business. I think there's less than 2% of the apparel that is made in the USA today. Anyway, we can debate whether it really makes sense to return apparel manufacturing to the USA or not. Mm-hmm. But certainly it would make sense. I think it would make a lot of sense to maybe have a Western Hemisphere that would have a greater influence and ability to produce just from an onshoring standpoint.
Right. If you can't get it in the U.S., at least get it closer. That's the first step.
If everything that goes with that. So certainly Mexico, Canada, and Central America could be a huge, could help replace some of that. You won't be able to replace all of it just simply because of the workforce, the number of workers that's required. When you look at the population of China, India, these other places, there's just not enough population, not enough people to put to work to sew garments.
Well, and if people aren't in the apparel industry, you also have to think about all the components that go in. It's not just a facility to sew the garments. Where does the fabric come from?
No, you're right.
Right? So you've got to think about it from the very beginning all the way through that process.
Supply chains through
it has to be thought through. And
it's fabrics, it's buttons, it's zippers, it's everything.
It's all of it. And, and technology is going to have to step up, right? At least for this category.
Yeah, without a doubt. Mm-hmm. And robotics would have to step up significantly, and automation. So not sure how many real apparel jobs that you would return. But anyway, so that kind of struck me. The other thing that I got to witness through the time span that I worked was the incredible rise of mass merchants in the USA. The Walmart was in the 70s and the 80s. Walmart was building stores in the 90s like crazy, and so was Target. And how that changed the retail landscape. I can remember working for a supplier, and we were having a sales meeting, and this was probably in the early 1980s. And one of the salesmen in the meeting said, "Are you sure we should really be devoting that much production to Walmart stores? You know, it's upsetting my other customers and they're selling it for less." And the salesman that was selling Walmart said, "Well, why wouldn't we? I mean, what they're not doing anything wrong. They're not doing anything illegal. They're simply buying the product from us at the same price we sell it to everybody else, and they're selling it for less." So, you know, long ago, the EDLC strategy of Walmart was starting to pay off, and I got to see that.
Yeah, I was thinking about as you were saying that. You know, I joined 1990, and Walmart had under 2,000 stores.
Yeah.
And then, you know, when I retired from Walmart, it was over 4,500.
Yeah.
So just incredible growth, you know, and I can't say that I thought about that every day, you know, doing the job, but it did. It happened. And we would say to suppliers all the time, "Give us your best cost. Let me worry about the retail."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we were able to deliver that, to your point, and growth happened.
Yeah.
You know.
And then, and then I saw the onset of e-com start and Amazon. It was only 2004 when they actually started business, and they didn't really start disrupting apparel initially. And then they got as with Amazon and just about any business they got into, they started to have a significant effect. And so that, you know, to have a front row seat to see all of that was really amazing. Some of the things that I'm most proud of, I guess, of in my career, we were Intradeco was the supplier of the year at Walmart it was either 2012 or 2013, and that was for the entire store. That wasn't just
you're on the big
apparel.
stage. Is what you're saying.
We were on the big stage. And to be the supplier of the year for the entire store. And we were competing for that award with people like Johnson & Johnson, Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
To win that award from the largest retailer in the world was humbling and extremely satisfying. I mean, that was wonderful. I mean, we fed off that for quite a while.
Well, and you should, because, you know, we as a merchant team, we didn't take those decisions lightly.
Oh,
right?
I know.
And I mean, almost, I won't say we got into any fist fights or anything like that or hair pulling, but there was a considerable amount of review.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure everybody had another well-deserved supplier that we could have lost that to. So we also won a number of sustainability awards. And we were a really early adapter of and believer in the sustainable effort. Our founder was a believer in the sustainability that we should bring to our products. And I'm sure your viewers probably know that, you know, landfills get hundreds of thousands of pounds of apparel every year. And, you know, there's apparel actually has gone through deflation for about 2 or 3 decades. I can tell you that the things that I sold in 1990 are cheaper today than they were in 1990.
Wow.
I mean, it's just because of everything. Obviously, production moving to the cheapest country and efficiencies really in the apparel process. Mm-hmm. So a T-shirt now, you know, with fast fashion, you know, we all buy probably a lot more clothes than we ever need because we can. It takes a smaller percentage of the consumer's wallet than it did years and years and years ago. But Intradeco has continued to push sustainability. And even today, Intradeco has invested in machinery in Central America where you take the cutting room scraps. You know, when you're going to make a garment, you've got a marker that sits out there and you cut around that. And if you're lucky, you get 85% efficiency. It could be less. So that means you've got 15% of that fabric that is just waste. And we can now take that fabric as well as other finished products. We've also bought a sorting machine to bring in old garments from people, and we put them into the machine, and it turns them into yarn, which can be then turned into products again. So it's a regenerated cotton process. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure they will continue to make efforts in that range. So
in my mind, Intradeco is always at the forefront of really challenging themselves on, you know, what's the next step, what's the next thing. In fact, I can't remember the year we went, but there was one tour in Central America that we went and we saw some of your factories at Interdeco, and the fact that they were run off king grass.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That was in our biofuels. Yes. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So, the efficiency of the factory. Now what you're talking about is, efficiency and regeneration of products that have served their time. So, I look forward, and in fact, on LinkedIn, every post I make about some new development, catches my attention because I would say you all challenge yourself harder than we as partners challenge you.
Well, if you saw our factories today, or if you took a tour of our factories in El Salvador and Honduras, you would see the roofs filled with solar panels, and you would actually see a solar farm, just because that was the right thing to do. And, quite honestly, all of these investments in sustainability also had a business side to them that made sense, but we were really happy to be able to join the two together.
Yeah, very cool.
Lastly, I think maybe the thing that I'm most proud of in my career is what Interdeco was able to contribute during the COVID crisis. All of a sudden in late 2019 in China, you heard some things, and then in March of, and I know that it was March in 2020 because I can remember coming home from a trip from New York that we weren't really sure that we wanted to go on. Mm-hmm. But this trip was really triggered by, quite honestly, a meeting that we had with you and Andy. Anyway, on the way home, we're glad to get out of there. And my son is on the trip with me. He works at Interdeco. And he's sitting in his seat, and he pulls out latex gloves to put on and wipes down his tray. I mean, this was, COVID, it was only 5 years ago, but it seems like it's been forever.
Yeah. Yes.
We didn't know how the disease was spread. We didn't have a cure for it, and it was killing people. And so business fell off the charts for about 3 weeks, and then it came back instantly when the essential retailers like Walmart, Target could open up again, because obviously you start to run out of things, and you needed to have a retail place to be able to go get them. I mean, we needed groceries, we needed food, we needed toilet paper. Remember the toilet paper crisis?
Oh, yes, I think we may have finished the last roll at our house. I'm not sure.
Yes, we all stockpiled for a long time. Anyway, then technology rescued us from a meeting standpoint because we were frantically trying to get things up and running again in retail and on the supplier side. So Zoom meetings, Teams, we could start to meet again. And I think we were all pretty happy with that because it also meant we didn't have to travel and meet in person. Right. So the other thing we figured out was, okay, well, we don't really want to go to the store. I can remember for a while being afraid to even go outside because we just didn't know how it was spread. So we started to order things online, and we'd all probably had been ordering some things from Amazon prior to that. But now all of a sudden, retailers like Walmart, Target, all retailers that had a website found their website flooded with orders. I think I saw, the numbers vary from a couple of different sites that I looked at, but I know that e-com in total grew about 50% from 2019 to 2021. So it was a huge leap. Up to that point, e-com had been growing at about a 12 to 15% rate a year, starting back in 2012 or 2013. And we knew that it was important, but it was not something that we were focusing on because even though it was growing at 12 to 15%, it was still a small percentage of what everybody was doing.
Right. And
now all of a sudden, it demanded your attention, and you didn't have a choice. You needed to figure out retail, all of the retailers needed to figure out how to fill these orders, and suppliers needed to figure out how. All of a sudden, we went from, okay, well, we're used to shipping a 5,000 to 10,000 unit order or a whole truckload of something, but now how do you ship 48 units of something in the same distribution center that you're doing this in? So investments were made, but beyond investments, you had to find personnel that knew how to make this happen because you were, from our standpoint, we said, okay, we know how to manage a business where we're filling a round rack and we're keeping that in stock. But how do you sell something that shows up as and I know it sounds stupid now, but back then, how do you sell something that shows up as a picture on a website, and how much of it do you make? And so
it was a whole new formula.
Yeah.
That you had to really start from the foundation
Yes.
of how to build it. What's the demand going to be, which is what you're articulating, and literally how do you sell it in this medium versus what up to your career at this point had been a physical, responsibility.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. So I know that, we, both the suppliers and retailers, were going out and hiring experts or people that had a lot more experience in e-com fulfillment and digital marketing. And then you're putting these two teams together. So now you have competing interests in one business where, some of the visionary leaders, I would say like Doug McMillan and like the founder of our company, Felix Aman, saw that, e-com is definitely the future. I know we're losing money on everything we ship. And I know it's a small portion of the business. And I know it's easier to do the brick and mortar business, but we have to address this. Mm-hmm. So that caused suppliers to look for innovative ways in their supply chain and their distribution networks. We went to robotics and some other thing in fulfillment, and we hired people, and Walmart did the same thing. But for these people to work together took a little while because there were competing interests for the resources of the company. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of how we've got to where we're at today in omnichannel. Now you've got people that are managing 2 to 3 times the SKUs that they used to manage. Mm-hmm. And that gives everybody less time, mm-hmm. and not as much time to maybe spend on some of what used to be the softer skills of retail.
Well, and it's true. And from a merchant's chair, they were very busy just managing a brick and mortar.
Oh, it's
very
not like
busy. If you were e-com only, you were very busy managing many SKUs, right?
Yeah.
And suddenly, congratulations, you're now an omni merchant. Okay, you get both. Well, thank you. What takes priority? And depending on which side you came from, right? You had to learn the whole other discipline.
Oh, yeah.
And what it took to make it successful, because what you just articulated was that they're very different things.
Yes.
Right? And so you have to be of two mindsets. Yeah. You want to nurture and grow this. You want to keep the volume going with this. And how do you devote enough time, which is the limited resource, right? Yeah. To make it all come together well in omnichannel. And it's not just Walmart that's doing that, right? It's every retailer out there that's trying to find their way and learn those same things in real time. As during COVID, it's ramping up, right? So no pressure or anything else to add to it.
It's not like you didn't have a full-time job before.
Exactly. So it's amazing. And I hope you viewers, you might want to just rewatch the first part of this podcast, because he just dropped a lot of knowledge on all of us. And what a front row seat you have had.
Yes.
To be able to say, you've been there and done it, and maybe you should write a book. Maybe you should.
Well, I just feel very fortunate that I had that opportunity.